Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. You guys sent in some really interesting stuff this week about Aloha Airlines Flight 243.
Yeah, it's a really, really wild story.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we're going to take a deep dive into that today.
Yeah.
This is one of those, like you said, really wild stories where a routine flight in Hawaii turns into this crazy fight for survival when part of the plane rips open.
Midair.
Midair.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at what happened, why it happened, all the factors that were kind of at play that day. And then what's really interesting is how this event changed the aviation industry.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly interesting about it is that it really throws a spotlight on kind of this intersection between human behavior and engineering, and then this constant drive we have to make air travel even safer.
Yeah, and this one really kind of brings it all into focus. So let's set the scene. It's April of 1988, a beautiful sunny day in paradise. Aloha Airlines Flight 243 takes off from Hilo, Hawaii, headed for Honolulu.
Right, a short flight.
Yeah, just a quick little 35-minute hop.
Yeah.
Passengers are probably, thinking about getting to the beach or, whatever they're doing in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Just completely relaxed, not a care in the world.
Mm.
And importantly, this plane had already completed 3 round trips that day,
Yeah.
totaling 8 flights.
Yeah, they were really racking up the mileage on that thing. It had probably seen better days.
And this was apparently, standard procedure for this aircraft, which when you hear that, you're like, 8 flights.
Yeah.
That's when you start to think about the wear and tear on a plane.
Right, it makes you think about the metal fatigue.
Right. Like, how much can this thing really take? You would think that it could take that many flights because why else would they do it? But
Right.
you'd think they'd
Yeah.
do better.
Yeah. It's kind of like a little unnerving when you think about it. And here's the really crazy part. One passenger even noticed a crack on the plane's exterior while they were boarding.
Oh, no.
But, and this is the thing, put yourself in their shoes for a second.
Yeah.
Would you flag it? Would you say something?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because you'd think, it's a big airline. Surely they've got
Yeah.
mechanics. They've checked this thing out.
Right, right. You don't want to be that person who freaks out.
Exactly. It's like you assume everything is fine. They do this every day.
Totally.
And so it's just really fascinating. This little detail, this tiny little crack that someone saw that they maybe didn't report because they didn't want to make a fuss, ended up being a really big deal.
Right.
So about 20 minutes into the flight, as they're reaching their cruising altitude of 24,000 feet, everything changes.
And we're not talking about like a slow, gradual, oh, we've got a problem developing here kind of thing. This was sudden. It was an explosion.
Yeah.
Passengers described hearing this deafening bang, and like within seconds, a massive section of the fuselage just ripped open.
Yep. 35 square meters of the fuselage.
Gone.
Just gone.
Just gone. Like the roof and sides of the plane.
Yeah, so imagine the terror, right? You're cruising along, and all of a sudden, the sky's above you, the wind is whipping through the cabin.
Yeah.
I read that it was almost 500 kilometers an hour.
Oh, my God.
The temperature plummets to minus 45 degrees Celsius.
And on top of that, you can't breathe.
And you can't breathe.
Yeah, because at that altitude, the air is so thin. So now you've got hypoxia setting in, and that's where people start to lose consciousness. They did have the oxygen masks, they dropped down, but the system was damaged, so even that was kind of a scary, is this going to work?
Right, like how long is this going to last?
Right, exactly.
So something out of a movie. And it's just amazing to me that people, were able to even function, let alone
Right.
in this chaos. I mean, you can't even imagine. But this is where we have to talk about the incredible actions of the flight attendants, particularly Michelle Honda. So in this pandemonium, debris is flying everywhere. People are understandably freaking out.
Yeah.
She's trying to reach the cockpit,
Right.
and she's met with silence.
So
So she's thinking, are the pilots okay? Like, what's going on? And I think that's when, that human instinct for survival kicks in, and she makes this decision to go from passenger to passenger. And she's asking, can anyone fly this plane?
Wow.
Can you imagine being asked that
Oh,
question?
my gosh, I can't even imagine. Talk about pressure.
No kidding. But she knew that if she didn't find somebody, that was it. She
Yeah.
eventually was able to reach the cockpit, but not before witnessing something really horrifying. Her colleague, another flight attendant, Jane Sato, had been injured and was unconscious.
Oh, my gosh, that's awful.
So we're going to talk about what happened in the cockpit when we come back.
Yeah.
So you've got this dual reality playing out on this flight. You got the passengers who are, dealing with the elements and the lack of oxygen. And then in the cockpit, you have the pilots.
Right, who've got their own set of problems.
Yeah, I mean, they're dealing with the same chaos. They probably can't breathe either.
Right, debris flying everywhere.
And trying to fly a plane that's literally coming apart.
Well, and their cockpit door was gone. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
ripped away with the decompression, so they were really exposed to the full force of it.
And not able to communicate as easily either, probably.
Right, yeah. Communication was a big problem for them.
Yeah.
So Captain Robert Schumsheimer and First Officer Mimi Tompkins, they had to keep their heads together and make some really quick decisions to try and keep this plane in the air.
I mean, I remember in the video they were saying that the nose of the plane was actually drooping.
Yeah, like a meter.
By a meter. Held together by the floorboards.
Yeah, basically.
It's incredible.
Crazy. So what did they do? Like, what's the first thing you even do when something like that happens?
Well, they had to get down to an altitude where they could breathe.
Okay.
So they had to execute this rapid emergency descent from 24,000 feet, all the while battling these strong winds and trying to maintain control over this, hunk of metal that's flying through the air.
And they don't even know how badly it's damaged.
No idea.
So you have no idea if anything's going to work. Right. And just to add to that stress, they had a 10,000-foot mountain Halikala summit.
Oh, right.
Between them and their intended landing strip in Maui.
So they couldn't even just go straight down.
No, they had to navigate around that.
Wow. Every second must have felt like an eternity.
Absolutely. And then, as if they didn't have enough to worry about, one of the engines failed.
Oh, my God.
So now they're down to a single engine.
Trying to land a plane that's disintegrating.
Yeah, and no clue if the landing gear was going to work, if the other engine would hold out. It was just get to Maui and pray.
Meanwhile, you've got the passengers in the back who have no idea what's happening.
No idea. Just holding on for dear life.
So they finally get to Maui.
13 minutes and 42 seconds after the explosion.
And they touch down.
Against all odds.
The video had that footage of them using the emergency slide to evacuate. Just the looks on their faces. I mean, the relief, the shock. It's amazing that anyone survived that.
It really is. They were very lucky.
Only one fatality.
Sadly, they did lose flight attendant C.B. Lansing. She was probably ejected from the plane during the decompression.
Oh, that's awful.
It is, but it's a miracle it wasn't more, given how bad the damage was.
And they said that it really is probably because the seatbelt sign was on.
That's what they think, yeah.
Which just goes to show you, like, those little things,
right,
they really do matter. But let's talk about what caused this, because this wasn't just bad luck.
No. There were definitely some contributing factors that the NTSB uncovered.
So this wasn't just bad luck. There was an investigation. What did they find out?
Yeah. The National Transportation Safety Board, they launched a full-scale investigation, and it really dug into the role of metal fatigue in this whole thing.
Metal fatigue. What is that?
It's a big deal with aircraft, especially as they get older. Think of it like a paperclip. If you bend it back and forth enough times, eventually it's going to snap. That's basically metal fatigue. It's that repeated stress that causes these microscopic cracks. And over time, those cracks can grow. They weaken the metal, and then you have a recipe for disaster.
So every flight puts that stress on the plane.
Exactly. Takeoff, landing, pressurizing at altitude, depressurizing back on the ground. Every single flight cycle puts stress on the plane's structure. And this particular Boeing 737, it was 19 years old. It had gone through almost 90,000 flight cycles.
Wow.
Yeah, so it had seen a lot of action, especially considering they used it for those short hops.
Right, so it's going up and down a lot.
Exactly, up and down, up and down. And then you throw in the humid, salty air in Hawaii.
Which is probably not great for a plane.
Not ideal. Corrosion was a big factor. The NTSB found that the combination of those tiny cracks that you can't even see and the corrosion, it just weakened the fuselage. Yeah. And boom, you have this catastrophic failure.
So the plane was old, it had been through a lot, and it was flying in a harsh environment.
Basically. But here's where it gets really interesting. The NTSB discovered that Aloha Airlines, while they were following the regulations, they weren't doing everything that Boeing had recommended for these older planes with lots of flight cycles.
Wait, so Boeing, the company that made the plane, said they should be doing more inspections.
Right. I recommended stricter inspections, but the FAA hadn't made those mandatory yet.
So Aloha Airlines was following the rules, but they weren't going above and beyond to really make sure the plane was safe.
Exactly. And that's what's so scary, right? It takes a tragedy sometimes to expose those gaps in the system.
So what changed after this happened? Because I'm guessing they made some changes.
Oh, absolutely. This incident was a huge wake-up call for the aviation industry.
Like what?
Well, first off, they implemented the Aging Aircraft Safety Program in 1991. It made those stricter inspection protocols mandatory for older aircraft, especially the ones with lots of flight cycles. Right. And they started using more advanced inspection techniques, too, like eddy current testing, which can actually detect those microscopic cracks.
Oh, wow. So they can actually see the invisible now.
Pretty much. And beyond that, the entire approach to maintenance changed. It wasn't just about checking for visible damage anymore. It was about looking at the big picture. How old is the plane? How many flights has it been on? What's the risk of these hidden problems like metal fatigue and corrosion?
So they basically had to rethink everything because of this one flight.
They did, and it led to a lot of positive changes, not just for Aloha Airlines, but for the whole industry.
And isn't that the whole point of doing this? Of taking these deep dives? It's about learning from the past, right? Understanding why these events happen so we can try to prevent them from happening again.
Exactly.
Aloha Airlines Flight 243. It's a story of survival, yeah, but it's also a reminder that we can always be doing more to make things safer. Whether it's flying, driving, even just walking down the street, it makes you think about those potential dangers that we might be overlooking every day.
It really does. You just never know.
You just never know. All right, everybody, thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll be back next time with another one.